Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday, December 16th. Wow. Today is Wednesday, December 16th, 2022. And this is a committee hearing on the Committee of Education. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligence or prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I know that the hour has come. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on this screen. Madam Clerk.
Vice Chair, Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember O. Councilmember Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Gautier.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues, and to all of the witnesses present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Phillips.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Lozada.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Squilla. And Chair, Councilmember Thomas.
I'm present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and the hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing on the Committee of Education regarding resolution number 220928. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 220928. Authorizing the Committee on Education to hold hearings to understand Pennsylvania's Act 158's changes to state graduation requirements and their impact on Philadelphia students, and to learn more about the School District of Philadelphia's plan to implement and support schools and students with these new requirements.
Before we hear testimony from the witnesses that we have to hear today, everyone has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that the public meeting is now being recorded. That the public hearing is now being recorded. Because the public hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they may have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow council members to signal that they would like to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first panel? Before we call the first panel of witnesses, do any of my colleagues want to make any remarks as relates to this resolution or this hearing today? All right, hearing none. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first panel of witnesses we have here to testify this afternoon?
The first panel is Alan Turner, Siobhan Savage, and Carrie Blackman, and other members of the school district.
Good afternoon. If you're connected and ready to proceed, please state your name for the record and you may begin with your testimony.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Alan Turner, and I serve as the Director of Quantitative Research at Research for Action, a 30-year-old education research and evaluation firm based in Philadelphia. RFA's mission is to use field-driven insights to advance equity and educational opportunities and outcomes for underserved students and their families along the early childhood to post-secondary education pipeline. I also serve as the co-director of the Philadelphia Education Research Consortium, which is a research practice partnership with the School District of Philadelphia funded by the William Penn Foundation. PERC's goal is to generate practical and actionable research that can be used by decision makers to support students in the school district. Finally, I'm a proud resident of South Philadelphia and a parent to a third grader at Nebinger, a district-operated K-8 neighborhood school. I have great admiration and respect for the educators at Nebinger, and I want to acknowledge the deep care and attention they give every day to the entire school community. I want to thank you for inviting me to testify this afternoon about changes to statewide graduation requirements articulated in Pennsylvania's Act 158 of 2018. In October of this year, under the PERC umbrella, RFA and the district co-published a report using historical data to help inform future support for students in schools. Researchers from RFA and the district's Office of Research and Evaluation worked closely with district leaders to design and publish the study to inform data-driven conversations and strategies around Philadelphia's response to the policy. The goal of my testimony today is to provide context for the discussion today. I will first talk about Act 158, briefly explaining the policy and its origins. Then I will highlight key findings from PERC's October report, Changing the Finish Line, which is published on the PERC website at philedresearch.org. I will close with implications for policy and practice and some framing questions for consideration. I welcome your questions at the conclusion of my testimony. So, beginning with the class of 2023, graduating Pennsylvania high school students will need to demonstrate career or post-secondary preparedness in addition to meeting existing statewide and local graduation requirements. This means that Act 158 layers on additional graduation requirements to pre-existing state and district-wide requirements, which for most students in the district included 23.5 credits and a service learning project. Act 158 outlines 5 pathways to meeting the new additional requirements, including 2 that rely exclusively on Keystone exam performance, and 3 that allow for alternative demonstration of college or career readiness. For those of you who don't know, Keystone exams are standardized tests designed to be end-of-course evaluations that assess students' knowledge in biology, Algebra 1, and literature. Act 158 and the use of high-stakes exams as indicators of college and career readiness is a product of a longstanding statewide debate surrounding Keystone exams and graduation. In 2006, a report by the Governor's Commission on College and Career Success communicated a strong desire to leverage standardized tests to set a statewide standard for the skills needed to succeed in the 21st century economy. Keystones were first administered 6 years later in 2012, and the plan at the time was that by 2017, a proficient score on all 3 end-of-course Keystone exams would be required for graduation across all 501 school districts in Pennsylvania. Several moratoriums delayed implementation due to concerns and criticisms about the lack of evidence that exit exam policies improve outcomes for students, research by the Pennsylvania Department of Ed and others that showed a likely disproportionate impact on districts with historically low Keystone proficiency rates, and third, the fact that as Pennsylvania was looking to implement high-stakes graduation exit exams, many other states were backing away from these types of policies. In fact, the number of states with such policies declined from nearly 30 in the late 1990s to 11 in 2019. This debate laid the groundwork for Act 158, what many perceive to be a more inclusive policy because it allows for alternative pathways to graduation in the event that Keystone performance requirements aren't met. Though the policy was passed in 2018, it's set to be implemented for the first time for the graduating class of 2023. Still, the policy has been a bit of a moving target. Subsequent legislation, as recently as July of this year, has been passed. That legislation gives special consideration for students impacted by COVID and also provides additional pathways and supports for students experiencing educational instability due, for example, to homelessness or involvement in the juvenile justice or foster care systems. So Act 158 is a policy with many details and layers. In the broadest strokes, the policy requires that in addition to existing state and local requirements, students either attain at least a proficient score on each Keystone exam or take all three and meet a composite threshold, or obtain proficiency on alternative requirements, known as alternative pathways. There are three alternative pathways. Some of the parameters of the alternative pathways are intended to be locally determined. This means that each LEA, or local education agency, has authority to define exactly what it means to demonstrate readiness for college or career through these pathways. The first pathway is the Career and Technical Education, or CTE, concentrator. For students who complete at least half of a CTE program in which they're enrolled, they must also demonstrate readiness for continued meaningful engagement in the CTE concentrator program of study, demonstrate a high likelihood of obtaining an industry-based competency assessment, or obtain an industry-based competency certification. The second alternative pathway is the alternative assessment pathway, where students can provide evidence of meeting specified score thresholds on an improved alternative assessment, like the ACT, the SAT, an IB or AP exam, or successful completion of a concurrent enrollment course, a pre-apprenticeship program, or acceptance in a four-year nonprofit college. The third alternative pathway is the evidence-based pathway. Demonstration of three pieces of evidence consistent with students' goals and career plans is required. This could look like concurrent college-level coursework, a community learning project, completion of an internship or an externship, or a letter guaranteeing full-time employment, among other options. So from where I sit with this policy, I see a lot of system building challenges and opportunities ahead associated with implementing it for districts across the state. But particularly in Philadelphia, where many students attend high schools outside of the district, and so there are many LEAs in play in the city of Philadelphia with their own specific authority to determine some of the parameters of the policy. And the contextual fact that systems that support youth across Philadelphia can be disjointed and siloed. So the first implementation challenge of Act 158 is really understanding what it means across the district and charter LEAs, in school buildings, and for individual students and families, including how many and which students need to pursue alternative pathways each year. Next, as I mentioned, for some aspects of alternative pathways, the requirements are to be locally determined. So LEAs have to decide and articulate what counts, for example, as a qualified pre-apprenticeship program or internship. Once LEAs make sense of the scope of the policy, they need to build systems to track all the pieces of evidence for each alternative pathway for each student across their entire high school career, and ensure adequate capacity and skill across all high schools to populate the tracking system. Then, once requirements are understood and the systems are ready, the next step is figuring out what qualified programs and resources already exist that meet the requirements for alternative pathways. And then, what new or expanded programs or resources are needed to make sure all students have access to the pathways that make sense for them. So as a researcher, these to me are questions that can be answered with data, and much of this work has already started. So under the PERC umbrella, RFA and the district set out last spring to use what we knew about the policy at the time and historical district data to give some insight into the very first challenge I presented, which is what does the policy mean and how many and which students are likely to be impacted in the district. So the research question that our study sought to ask was, if Act 158 were in place for the classes of 2018 and 19, what share of district students would have met either of the two Keystone graduation pathway requirements? We examined the records of over 16,000 district students in all traditional district high schools, including neighborhood, citywide, and criterion-based schools. We found that just over 1/3 of students in the historical sample achieved Keystone scores sufficient to have met the requirements to graduate through the Keystone pathways, had they been in place. Another way of looking at this is that nearly 2 in 3 students would have needed to pursue an alternative pathway, That's equivalent to about 5,000 students in each cohort. We also found that an additional 10% of students, or about 800 per cohort, would have almost met the graduation requirements of the Keystone Pathways, likely needing some but not extensive support to satisfy the requirements. That might look like, for example, retaking one exam to meet the composite threshold. We found that the policy is likely to impact all student groups in the district, but would likely disproportionately impact some more than others. So, for example, when identifying students with scores sufficient to meet the Keystone Pathway requirements, the student group with the largest share of students, at 56%, were those who were identified as Asian. Students identified as English learners were the student group with the smallest share, at 8%. Similarly, all schools will likely be impacted. We found that many, nearly 50 schools in the district, will be significantly impacted, which we defined as having less than a quarter of students with Keystone scores sufficient to graduate through the Keystone Pathways. So in writing this report and through resulting conversations, it's clear to me that this is a collective challenge and it will require a collaborative effort. And I'm going to end my remarks with what the PERC team sees as critical implications of our report for your consideration. First, the city needs a dual strategy to support students to graduate, aimed at both improving the ability of schools to improve student Keystone performance and ensuring the accessibility of alternative graduation pathways. As far as Keystones go, improving Keystone performance is already a school board goal, monitored publicly since 2020. The goal states that by August 2025, over half, 52% of high school students at the end of their 11th grade will be proficient on all 3 state high school assessments. That said, the data also suggests that it's critically important to equally prioritize ensuring that the requirements for alternative pathways are accessible and navigable. Second, the Keystone exam tracking systems have been in play for years, which is why we could use them for our report. Systems and processes for communicating about alternative pathways and tracking the associated pieces of evidence, in my mind, need to be the focus moving forward, including discussing what has already been accomplished and what's needed, both in the short and long term. We know, for example, that district students and families can go into the student information system to see what Act 158 evidence the district has on record for them right now. School administrators and staff can see how many and which seniors this year will need to be counseled and supported either to gather evidence of having met a requirement for an alternative pathway or figure out what they need to do between now and the end of the summer to graduate. I'll close with some questions that I have, which I hope will be helpful in thinking about where we are, what still needs to happen, and collaboratively across the city, who can lead and support strategic efforts. 1, what is the status of the systems that the district has built to communicate with families and partners about the policy and track evidence towards graduation requirements? 2, do all schools have the capacity and knowledge to counsel students about their status and options, gathering existing or forthcoming pieces of evidence and populate the system with it? If not, what capacity is needed and where, and what resources are needed to support these efforts in the short and long term? 3, what existing resources and experience will count as evidence for alternative pathways? 4, do external partners know if what they offer students counts and how to generate and submit required documentation? 5, and lastly, what new or expanded resources and experiences do we need to make sure that all students have access to the pathways that make sense for them? So my hope is, as a researcher, that we continue to be able to use systematic data to understand the experiences of school staff and students as they navigate these challenges, as well as to monitor and assess what's working and for whom, to hold each other accountable for student success and inform course corrections when needed. As a committed district parent and an education researcher with deep respect for educators, I'm hopeful that the implementation challenges associated with this policy will turn into opportunities for collaborative systems building to better support the youth of our city. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your testimony. In order to hear from everybody, we will be moving on to the next witness, Siobhan Savage, and save questions for later.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Let me just, a couple of things. So I'm told that the superintendent is limited on time. So we want to allow the superintendent to be able to communicate his testimony next. But Ms. Turner, I do want to thank you for your testimony. Colleagues, I want to make sure that you know that after the superintendent, I do want to be able to open it up for questions. And Ms. Turner, I can tell you right now that those 5 questions that you just stated, we're definitely going to revisit those 5 questions and see if we can do a deeper dive into some of the concerns that you communicated based on your 2018-19. Is that the school year you analyze? Okay. All right. So let's pass it to our superintendent because we know he's limited on time. And then after that, we'll close out this panel and open for questions for council members. Superintendent, thank you for being here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to be here to testify. I'm going to extend my time so that I can, before I leave, so that we can complete the presentation because I want to be around for the questions. Certainly want to recognize for the record that our board president, Reginald Streeter, is here. Also joined by Deputy Superintendent for Academics, Ms. Siobhan Savage. We'll be doing this presentation together. Finally, before we jump in, Mr. Chairman, I think we have a PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to queue up. And while that's being queued up, I certainly want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your efforts to secure $2 million to help our students to meet the graduation requirements. So on behalf of the school district, we certainly appreciate that. If that slide deck is going to be pulled up, I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to review a couple of slides, and we tried to make this very intuitive and very clear. And the presentation itself will speak to some of the 5 questions that Dr. Turner spoke to. So I think that may be coming up momentarily. All right, so Mr. Chairman, again, thank you. I want to jump right in. I'll be joined by Deputy Superintendent Savage. I want to give a little district context related to Act 158 here in the School District of Philadelphia. I want to start with this on the next slide, our vision for the school district, because Act 58 and graduation rates are central to it. You know, our vision is that the school district will achieve the board's goals and guardrails that Dr. Turner referenced. We are monitoring those goals and guardrails in our meetings all the time. And it is our vision to position the school district of Philadelphia to become the fastest improving large urban school district in the country. So where are we going? Now, in terms of the fastest improving, we're thinking about significant improvement of our 4-year graduation rate, reducing our dropout rate, and also improving our NAEP performance, the nation's report card test, relative to other large school districts. So that's how we think about measuring that. As we move the slide up to get to the next slide where it says where we are going, in the school district, it's no surprise that student graduation is in the center of this graphic. Now, in order to move our current 70% 4-year graduation rate, we know that a top priority has to be for us with safety. That's something we're focused on. You've heard a bit about that recently. We have an immediate focus in the school district on monitoring and improving daily student attendance and teacher attendance and our dropout rate. While at the same time on the right side of this screen, you'll see that our next step involves the development of an aggressive 5-year strategic plan. That work is underway right now in the school district and will continue over the next few months. And we'll bring an aggressive plan about how we'll get there to the Board of Education for approval near the close of this school year. But student graduation is at the center of everything we do because we want to significantly improve our 70% graduation rate. As you move to the next slide, it's entitled, What is Act 158? I'm going to now ask Deputy Superintendent for Academics, Ms. Siobhan Savage, if she'll walk us through Where are we? What's the context for those 5 questions that Dr. Turner referenced? And then we'll be glad to take questions. Ms. Savage?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Council for having this hearing today, and to the Chairman, thank you again for inviting us to attend today and to present this information so that we can, as a system, think about how we can best support our students moving forward. Dr. Turner was kind enough to share some of the details around Act 158 and the policy as far as where it has come from, where it originated, and also why it is important to us at this particular point in time. Beginning with the class of 2023 and beyond, we will be looking to ensure that our students can satisfy one of the 5 pathways associated with Act 158 so that they can actually attain a School District of Philadelphia diploma. If you could scroll up to the next slide, please. Now, obviously, and I wanted to acknowledge that Act 58's requirements are new in terms of implementation to us in this particular school year. However, the Act itself, because of when it did come out, did give us some time to think about and prepare for how we were going to implement this system-wide. Please slide to the next, please move up to the next slide. So Act 158 in particular, as Dr. Turner alluded to, is in addition to our traditional credit and graduation requirements that we have upheld over time here in the School District of Philadelphia. So students actually have to attain 23.5 credits and also complete a multidisciplinary project in order to actually graduate from high school. That is a long-standing requirement. It's important to note that there are some students that are going to qualify for instead what is called a Keystone Diploma. We actually can allow students that don't actually meet the SDP graduation requirements in some extenuating circumstances to apply for these Keystone Diplomas. However, it's also important to note that they still have to meet an Act 158 pathway. There are 5 different pathways that are available, and you actually have to proceed through both the credit attainment and the pathway now in order to get the diploma. This next slide is actually a very consolidated graphic to demonstrate what these 5 different pathways are. It's important to note that Act 158 is actually complex and complicated. This is not a situation where it was something that we could roll out without thinking succinctly about how we actually implemented this, because we wanted to make sure that we were clear in our local guidance, that we were communicating appropriately to families, to students, and to our staff, and that we had actionable plans to provide access to all of our students. So you can see the Keystone Proficiency Pathway is what people are thinking of in terms of Pathway 1. And that requires students to demonstrate proficiency across all 3 of the Keystone exams. There's also an additional pathway where students can achieve a composite score across all 3 of those Keystones. That means that they have to actually score proficient or advanced on at least 1, and they have to score above or below basic on the other 2 in order to achieve a consolidated composite score of 4,452. Pathway 3 is the CTE concentrator, and that is for students that are currently in the CTE programs. Pathway 4 is alternative assessments, where students can actually present an additional piece of evidence from a list in order to meet that pathway. And Pathway 5 is actually the most interesting of our pathways. Students can pick 3 pieces of evidence across 2 separate categories of evidence in order to meet this pathway. So in thinking about our plan to implement Act 158, we actually created district level guidance. We have thought about how to best support our school leadership teams. We have planned for and have implemented supports for students and families. We have current data to share, and we also can demonstrate and have particular support needs that we'd like to elevate. Next slide, please. So for district level guidance, our central administrative staff have worked succinctly over the past number of years to come up with guidance for our schools and also for our partners. We have a 2022-2023 graduations requirement toolkit and a list of resources that are available for our internal staff. Wait, can you slide back up to the previous slide, please? Thank you. And those particular resources are what our internal staff at the school level have been utilizing in order to effectuate Act 158. We also have a number of different certifications that students can pursue for particular pathways, and we have succinctly listed those so that our school staff know which actual certifications qualify for which pathways. We also have a district-wide system to capture individualized graduation plans for our 12th grade students, with the intent that we capture those same plans for students in 9th through 12th grades in future years. Next slide, please. Now, for our school leadership teams in particular, and this includes our principals, we have provided ongoing professional learning that has actually started in August of this year. We also provide weekly updates for our school leadership teams through our internal weekly newsletters so that we can elevate changing guidance both on the local and the state level for our school teams. We have internal tracking mechanisms so that we can not just track which students have completed a particular pathway, but we can also track internally where students are in terms of their progress towards completion of a pathway. And our assistant superintendents are supporting our teams with analyzing that data so that we can stay on top of it to track student progress. Next slide, please. Now, support for our students and families has been elevated, and it's extremely important for our students and families to have the information necessary to understand what Act 158 is and also how to navigate this process. We sent out an informational letter in October to our families and our students so that they would understand the requirements of the pathways, and we also accompanied that letter with a stepper, which are actually directions on how students and families can access our portals in our student information system so that students and their families can track where students are in these pathways. Our students also will be receiving by Monday, December 19th, so this upcoming Monday, a letter that indicates where they are, not just in terms of their particular pathway, but also in terms of their credit attainment. So students might have already received that letter, and for the students that have not yet received that letter, they will be receiving it soon. We also have had family engagement sessions at the school level for our families to be invited into this particular process and given the information and knowledge so that they can advocate appropriately for their children. And we've been providing activities and access points for students to satisfy the pathways. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be helpful to take council through some particular scenarios around what this looks like in the life of a child. So we have John, and John is actually a senior enrolled in culinary arts over at Randolph. In order for him to graduate, he has to meet both his credit requirements and the Act 158 requirements. This is an example of what this would look like for him. His school team actually noticed that he was failing math. So they arranged for him to access centralized tutoring so he can actually pass his math classes so that he'll reach the credit attainment necessary. He also needs to pass at least 50% of his CTE program, and he's on track to do so because he's already passed his level 1 and level 2 CTE courses. That also serves as a demonstration that he's ready for his NOCTI exam. He already has earned his Serve Safe food handler certification in 11th grade. That actually counts towards evidence of his industry certification as well. He's on track. There's a number of different pieces that will go into determining whether or not a student is on track, and we actually have mechanisms now within our student information system to track not just where the students are, but also for us to upload the actual evidence and attach it to a student's file. Next slide. So here's a closer look at a student that would use an alternate assessment. Mary is a senior at Martin Luther King High School. Just like John, she has to demonstrate, the actual meeting of an Act 1 pathway, but also she has to meet the school district's requirements around credits. She's on track to pass all of her classes, and she's an AB student, but she struggles with tests. She's already passed her Algebra 1 literature and biology courses, but she struggles to pass the Keystone exams because of anxiety. She was encouraged by her school counselor to apply early decision to Temple. She's already received her letter and she has committed. Her actual letter of acceptance to Temple will serve as evidence in the alternate assessment pathways. And because she hasn't missed too much school and she is an AB student, she actually has already attained the completion of her pathway. Next slide. One more, go back one more, please. There you go, right there. Let's take a look at the evidence-based pathway. So Brandon is a senior over at FLC. He already has determined that he doesn't want to go to school for 4 years, but he's, on track to graduate on time. He has to meet the SDP and the Act 158 category requirements as well, but he's going to create a different pathway for himself based upon the evidence-based pathway. So he has decided to actually enroll in a dual enrollment course that we actually have here available in the district in psychology because he's interested in pursuing psychology in some mechanism. He's not quite sure what his career in psychology will look like. He's also sure that he wants to attend CCP for 2 years for an associate's degree. He'll have a C average and pretty good attendance in June when he's scheduled to graduate, and he's already passed the Keystone courses. I was just waiting.
I apologize, Ms. Stafford. I'm going to have to stop sharing screen for a moment.
Okay.
Superintendent, we'll allow you to finish your questions. Your presentation shortly. I'm being told that there's a technical difficulty right now. If it's okay with colleagues, can we jump into some of the questions around what's been shared so far, and then we'll get back into the presentation. Or Superintendent, if there's anything that you wanted to add before we finish the presentation, I'll open up for questions.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, if you could give Deputy Superintendent Savage at least an opportunity to tell us the bottom line about where we are in terms of where our young people are in meeting these requirements.
Sure,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And speaking to that last student that we were actually speaking about, that actually gets to the internship piece because that's the pathway in which internships, externships, and co-ops sit within. So this student in particular would be interested in doing a 30-hour internship with a hospital and shadowing a psychologist because that's what he's interested in. So when you think about how we are actually coordinating these activities to support students in, completing these evidence-based pathways, that's just an example of all of the different pieces that could come together in order for the student to meet that pathway. Now, I want to just say a couple of things in terms of making sure people understand students can move across multiple pathways. Even if they have met one pathway, we want to give them the opportunity to access other pathways and make sure that, if we have a student that's passed all 3 keystones, they actually can access an internship or an externship as well. The pathways aren't meant to be constrictive. They're supposed to be exploratory. And we also wanted to elevate that students are connected to their schools. I am grateful and thankful for the staff in these school district schools every day because they endeavor to make sure that our students have what they need. And our data is starting to demonstrate that. We actually have 42% of our high school seniors who have already met one pathway within Act 158 and are also on track to meet their credit requirements. Interestingly, 52% of our seniors have already met an Act 158 pathway and are pursuing the completion of their credits. So it's an interesting thing now that we have built the systems to collect the data. We have a number of students that have already met their Act 158 pathways, but now are interested in exploring additional pathways. We're not even halfway through the school year at this point. Our second quarter hasn't ended. Making sure that the students that are in progress get to the finish line is important, and also making sure that the students that are already at the finish line have the opportunities to explore multiple things is something that we have elevated internally. My last talking point, honestly, I just want to express gratitude to council for the budget transfer, because it's going to actually satisfy a couple of things for the school district. We actually have requested, in terms of short-term support, some funds to make sure that our students can actually access test preparation and also the fee requirements for some of the industry certifications that give them access into the career readiness piece. And then from a longer-term perspective, we're very interested in working with the Commerce Department around building a larger database of employers so that our students across the city can actually access these internships and externships, as well as cooperative opportunities with our business partners out in the community, so that they can experience what it is to actually work in fields and areas that they would like to explore. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you again, Councilman Thomas, for bringing us together today.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. We appreciate it. I want to take a moment to just allow some of my colleagues to be able to ask questions that they may have. I think that we received a lot of information from the research perspective as well as the practical perspective. So, council members, are there any questions for members of this committee for the panel that we've just heard from? Chair recognizes Councilmember Lozada.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you again. I have questions and comments. This is my first committee hearing as a council member, but I had the opportunity over the course of the last 2 years to work on the ground, specifically with students in the Hunting Park, North Philadelphia, Fair Hill community. And I was able to speak with them on a one-on-one often about what was happening in school. I was sad to learn that many of them, juniors and seniors, felt that they were not ready to go to college, and that us on the ground connecting them to alternatives like employment or careers within some of our business corridors were what they felt were their only choices. And when I asked them why, many of them just said, I can't read. And so it's heartbreaking to me, and it's also very frustrating to me. And so I'd like to know, with these requirements, are we teaching students now based on how to pass these standardized tests or tests? Are we teaching them in a way where they're really comprehending and learning? And if we realize that if they can't read, then naturally they're not going to be able to follow the instructions, right? Biology, literature, and algebra are all very difficult subjects. And so how do we get them to the point where they're able to read those instructions to be able to pass? And then is there a way that, for someone like me who's a district council person, is there a way for me to see how my students in my schools are performing when compared to other schools throughout the city of Philadelphia?
Councilmember Lozada, let me just take a quick stab at that, and then I'll turn it back over to Deputy Superintendent Savage. I want to say two things. First, I appreciate the spirit of the General Assembly to think about multiple pathways to graduation. Although I know it's complex, a lot of people complain about it and said it's pretty onerous. There are states that solve this problem of not just making graduation decisions based on one test score given on one day. Some kids are better test takers than others, and some, quite frankly, have test anxiety, et cetera. We also have a good number of kids who are not well prepared, and we've got to own that and work better here in the school district. For example, I came from a state that dealt with this issue by weighting standardized tests that are required for graduation as a percentage of a final grade. For example, end of course tests in the high schools in North Carolina are 20% of a student's final grade. Another way is to count the test in a different way, but have multiple pathways. No one way or right way. but no decision should be made based on one test. No important decision should be made. That said, reading is a fundamental area that we know we have to continue to improve in the school district. Going to be very transparent about that. For example, in 3 through 8 reading, over the past several years, we've improved 4 percentage points, and our 3rd grade reading has been a bit flat. So we'll over the long term, we'll be doing a lot of work with the science of reading, which we know from a lot of research in other states that are improving early literacy. They're making progress there. Now, with the students we have right now who are in the high schools, and we're trying to get them across the finish line, we are, yes, helping students understand test taking and how to do those tests, because if we don't understand, it's hard to teach kids how to do it. We're also looking at how we not only teach kids how to take the test, but to be better readers. It's an intensive lift, and we're working on that. And I'll ask Deputy Superintendent Savage to say a bit more about that.
We do have a number of different mechanisms to support students in terms of intervention supports. We also have, our special education programming for the students that have qualified in that area to receive additional supports. And we have a combination of academic supports available that students can access. So we do, for example, have credit recovery programs. We do have Saturday school programs, and we also have summer school programs. It's really important for us to continue to provide the additional supports, but echoing what Dr. Watlington has said around looking at, through the strategic planning process, our larger continuum of education priorities and programs so that we can shift how we think about actually teaching students how to read is going to be extremely important in the next 6 months as we are endeavoring through the strategic planning process.
And then is there a way for me, to find or to receive a report out regarding how my schools are performing compared to those throughout the city?
And we actually do have internal collection mechanisms to collect this data. So we have it available district-wide. I will definitely inquire as to whether or not we can consolidate and aggregate that data by district and get that out to the council members so that they could see.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Are there any other, Chair recognizes Councilmember Gaudier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Dr. Watlington, to you and your team for your presentation and laying out the multiple pathways to meet the Act 158 requirements and even those examples that you gave. That was really helpful for me. I can appreciate that the law offers a lot of flexibility and has all these various pathways, but that also makes it somewhat confusing to a lay person. So I can imagine students trying to figure out if they have met the requirements or not, or parents trying to figure it out. It sounds like, with where we are, we have a good amount of students that have met the requirements for where we are in the academic year. However, I'm guessing that the students that have met the requirements might be the ones who are most self-sufficient. And I'm wondering, for students that will need more hand-holding and parents that will need more hand-holding to understand all of the various ways that they can meet these requirements and be prepared for graduation, are we sufficiently staffed to provide the level of hand-holding at each school that people might need? Because it does sound a bit confusing, at least to me.
And through the mechanisms that we actually have put in place around training our internal staff, our principals, our counselors, designated people within school teams have already received the training and are supporting students and their families with the one-to-one communication and guidance around what it is that the student has already done or can do in order to meet a pathway. But your point around the actual staffing piece is well taken. And I think as we continue to implement this and are now starting to think about how to operationalize this as we are moving through time, staffing is definitely going to be an issue, primarily because we are going to be faced with the task of doing this over and over and over again. And this actually was an unfunded mandate, which required an additional level of lift, not just here at central administrative offices, but also, into our schools. So we have worked out how to best support our seniors right now, having additional staff so we can backward plan into our 11th graders, our 10th graders, our 9th graders would be significant and an extreme help for our school teams.
And Councilmember Gautier, I'll just add, are we appropriately staffed? We absolutely are in need of more resources, and we absolutely are not afraid to ask for them. That's why we're so appreciative to the chairman, to Chairman Thomas, for his efforts to get us that $2 million, because every bit helps. The bottom line is that the school district of Philadelphia has been a historically underfunded school district. That's a matter of record. And we're not talking about give us a blank check so we can spend good money after bad on stuff that doesn't work. We're accountable for doing this work. We're making progress this year. Deputy Superintendent can provide the data to show that we're walking our way down to help our young people get across the finish line. But the reality is that there are neighboring districts that spend far more per student than we do. So we don't want to miss this opportunity to say that we're being accountable for the work. We are going to dig until we can get every kid across the line, do our best to do that. But do we need additional resources in the school district? Absolutely.
Thank you for that answer and the transparency. And I greatly appreciate, Mr. Chair, having this hearing. I think it's important for us to keep in touch about the progress that we're making and helping students to meet these requirements, and to continue having honest discussions about what resources are needed to make sure that every student crosses the finish line as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chair recognizes Councilmember Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. I want to echo the same sentiments of Councilmember Gautier. One of the things I want to note is that I have a college access background as well as career support, where essentially I worked every day advising students on what they need to do to get into college and also pursue careers. So in this role, it was more like a nonprofit external work that we did. I was wondering if we, given the fact that I had that role, one of the things I always thought about is how the school districts, throughout, Pennsylvania could do more to partner with college and career access programs to further supplement the advising that takes place with students to get them to the graduation pathway. I know, for example, many years ago, KIPP had a partnership around best practices with the school district around college counseling. But there's also other partners such as Philadelphia Futures, Teen Sharp is this, many other organizations that could be helpful in this regard. In addition to that, I'm thinking about the ideas that we have retired college and career counselors who may be willing to volunteer and support students, if we ask, or we can train some neighbors who are concerned in the education realm to, be volunteers for the time being as we wait for more funding from the state to take care of this issue. But I would just think about different innovative ways that we can explore to really support this particular concern. Because what's happening is that throughout the city of Philadelphia, we always hear people say, I want to help young people. Well, if they're talented and they're excellent, this could be a strong option for them to help young people in a way that is productive. So just something that I want us to consider, given my background and thoughts. So.
I'd like to just respond to that really quickly, Mr. Chairman, and just say that first, we know we can't do this work alone in the school district. Principals and teachers and counselors and the support staff can't do this by themselves. So we're thinking deeply in our strategic planning process right now about how do we organize the district to be really responsive to individuals like you who can partner with us? Now, here's what happens in a lot of school districts. You have grassroots organizations, you have nonprofits, we have other organizations that want to partner with the school district. And sometimes at the school level or the district level, when there's a lean staff and we've all got hands on deck trying to get this work done, we have to design systems to bring to match all these partners with the school district. And so, principals who are in class trying to support teachers, who are doing parent conferences, who are leading the schools, working on student management. Sometimes there's a taxing of the time available. And so we're looking at how we make sure that when someone like you shows up at 440 or at a school, you can partner with us. How do we make sure we have the infrastructure, people who can actually facilitate that work? Because I heard during my listening and learning tour, and this is not unique to the School District of Philadelphia, I want you to know this, at least I don't think it is, that people call, well, maybe not getting a phone call back promptly might be something that's unique that we need to work on based on the listening and learning tour. But sometimes it's not that people don't want to partner, but the resources are taxed kind of thin. So we're thinking about how to organize the work here at the district office and at the school building so that somebody answers the phone, so that we make a connection with you. And 3 months later, if somebody leaves, that partnership continues. And so we hear you loud and clear. And I don't know if Deputy Superintendent Savage wants to say more about that in terms of some of her staff that do that work.
Absolutely, because we do internally to the school district have college and career readiness coordinators, and we do also meet with some of these external partners. I think what's going to be great about the strategic planning process is our ability to engage a lot of different stakeholders in these conversations so that we can begin to think about the city as an ecosystem for all of these things so that we can better coordinate all of the services in a way that serves our children most appropriately and pull those different opportunities, those staff, those resources across multiple areas from city agencies to our nonprofits to our districts and even, into some of our other school entities. What does it look like for us to actually have a ready-made system for kids to tap into so that they are college and career ready?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council colleague. Let me just get a couple quick responses if we can, and then we can try to transition. First question, what does the relationship look like? I'm thinking about what Ms. Turner talked about in her testimony. What does the relationship look like between the school district and the city of Philadelphia? And what coordination is already happening to make sure that we're providing we said there's going to be a few thousand young people who are not going to qualify to graduate based on keystones. What coordination exists right now, and what do we expect to happen moving forward?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for raising that. We actually do meet with our partners in different city agencies now on a regular basis. We have
what are the agencies?
Which agency?
Yeah, what city agencies do you guys meet with?
Commerce.
Okay.
Office of Children and Family. And I call our deputy someone in case she would like to contribute to that.
You went in and out for a second. I heard you say Commerce, and I see our I see our leader of the Children and Families Department here. So I heard Commerce, I heard Children and Family, and you said something after that.
And I just actually acknowledged our deputy mayor to see if she would like to comment as well. We have been in contact pretty constantly since I have assumed this role because it is our purpose and our true, thought to create a partnership where we can be on the same page around what these different mechanisms are and how we can think about the different resources we have so we can coordinate them for the support of kids.
And before the deputy mayor goes, Mr. Chairman, we were also working closely with Otis Hackney in the mayor's office prior to his departure and prior to Deputy Superintendent Savage's return to the school district.
So, Councilman Thomas, if I may, it's Vanessa Garrett Harley, Deputy Mayor for the Office of Children and Families. I just wanted to address that question a little bit. I think it was a great question, and it is really important, the collaboration that is going on between the school district and the city, which I'm very pleased with Dr. Savage and Dr. Watlington, how well they are working and coordinating with us, because we all have the same goal. We want the best outcomes for all the young know that education is the fundament to that end. Who was the chief education officer for the city, left the city employment just a little while ago. And when Otis left, the work that was under him in the mayor's office of education is now coming under me as the deputy mayor for the office of children and families. And so in that regard, we take it very seriously. And so there is at a minimum a weekly meeting. Sometimes we actually meet twice a week or more often. And I'm talking about the formal meetings. Dr. Savage and I talk an awful lot. Way past that time frame as we're trying to get this stuff together. But the city is very committed to this. This is something that's very important to Mayor Kinney. And he also is involved in some meetings with Dr. Watlington and myself and others. And this is an area that is very important to him because we know that this is about the pathways to both post-secondary education, but also career pathways for some of our young people who may not be trying to, go to college route or whatever. We want to make them as successful as possible. So we do meet. So it is the Office of Children and Families, and our role, as I see it, is I kind of act as the coordinator between all of the other city agencies, given that Dr. Savage is, just coming back to the school district and other things. She may not know all of the people that she should be working with at the city. So we make sure that that happens. Commerce Commissioner Ann Nadal is very involved in this. I know she's on the call as well. And Ann is doing a lot of the coordination in terms of employment opportunities, internship opportunities, working with Chamber of Commerce and other folks, and she certainly could address that better. As we do that, the mayor's office is very involved as well. And any other city agency that we need to pull in, I have the ability to do that, and we do that. On those calls. So we are very involved in what the school district is doing at this time.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilman. I just want to add that I am so grateful for the support that we have received from the city as we have been transitioning our leadership here in the district. And it has been absolutely vital to be able to have these conversations as we have really begun to think about what these consolidated systems look like in support of our students. So I'm expressing my appreciation for that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just add that the Mayor Kinney and Deputy Mayor have worked with us to have us to take a hard look at how we continue to enhance our data sharing agreements. Because with 59 high schools and the thousands of graduates, it requires a different kind of data analysis. And when we build these systems in our student information system, which the city does not have access to, we have to then, we work and figure out how we make sure to generate the data that the city needs, because the city wants to make sure that, we're getting appropriate return on the investment for their city's resources as appropriate. And so that's why Deputy Superintendent Savage and her team will be able to figure out through that process how we provide data to particular council members who want to know specifically about the schools and their districts. And so we have the infrastructure to do that. It'll take us a little time, but we absolutely know we have the infrastructure to do it because we've been working closely with the city.
So listening to all the different partners and all the different stakeholders that's involved, I'm wondering if I'm a principal or administrator at a school and I'm struggling with this process as it relates to making sure that my young people have what they need in order to graduate. Who's my point of contact? Who would I reach out to if I'm a teacher or a principal? Because I don't want schools and teachers to feel like or to have the perception that they're on their own to figure this out.
I'm going to start by saying one of the things I did on my 110th day in the district, I reorganized the central office, and so that we could improve our reporting structures, our responsiveness, and our communication and deliver better outcomes. And I hired one person to lead the full academic division, and that's Deputy Superintendent Savage. Now she's then organized the academic division, and we're continuing to make some tweaks there. So I'll let her speak to specifically who principal's point of contact should be.
There actually are a number of our school district staff on this hearing today that are here to lend additional support to this process. And they have been working with principals and with school teams. Most notably, our assistant superintendents have provided support. We have 4 high school assistant superintendents within this division that work directly with principals around this process. They actually have leadership convenings on a regular basis where they share information. There's also an operations office within the chief of schools office where we have a master scheduler for high schools, Mr. Jeremy Wright, who is here, and he is an absolute rock star in supporting our schools and making sure we have the time during the school day to provide the academic support, the internship pieces, making sure that our actual courses are aligned with the different pathways. Krista Lauber is here as well. She sits within that office as well as Karen Kolsky, and they are literally single points of contact that teams can reach out to. They are our front line, really, in providing this additional support to our high schools. Our counselors also know that they can reach out if they need to these different folks on the team. There is a contact list that is embedded within all of the materials that we have shared with our school teams so that they know who to contact with what, for what. And that contact list actually includes the person's name, the person's title, and their email address so that we can automatically, give them the information they need as the requests are coming in.
Thank you. That was the long version of the answer to my question. So help me out. Give me the short version. If I'm a Frankfort High School grad, if I'm a teacher at Frankfort High School, if I'm Principal Calderon and I'm struggling with this, who am I on my own? And I'm assuming you're not based on your answer, but who do I call if I'm Principal Calderon?
If Principal Calderon is struggling, he should call first his assistant superintendent. And if he has real struggles, he can call me directly because they have my cell phone number.
And what if I'm a parent and I feel like I'm not getting a support system from a school? Who do I call?
If the parents are struggling and they feel like they're not getting the support systems, they can always call the FACE office to register a complaint, or they can reach out directly to the assistant superintendent to register a complaint. Most of our parents, though, will go to the school and reach out to the principal first and foremost, because we like to maintain that local relationship, and hopefully that it can be resolved at that level. But there are additional mechanisms for parents to come in. I did actually one day this past week run into a parent that came to make a complaint and was here down at 440 and came to meet with one of our high school assistant superintendents. So we are available. We want to make sure our families know that.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear that we've established the expectation that when parents or community members call 440 offices or a school, we expect them to get a prompt reply. If we don't know the exact answer, we want to acknowledge the question or concern and give them an estimated time period by which we will be back in touch. But we are working very hard to improve customer service. In fact, we've hired a new chief of communications and customer service. Her name is Alexandra Coppage, and you'll hear more about that when we come back after the winter break, because we're going to launch some new strategies that will be very public facing to back that up.
I want to revisit some of the things that Mrs. Turner talked about as it relates to the data that she analyzed from the 2018, 2019 academic year, and some of the numbers that she talked about communicated the percentage of young people who would have been eligible to graduate as well as those who would have been. I'm wondering what percentage of those young people who are eligible to graduate go to our magnet schools, the Centrals, the Girls High, the SLAs, and then what percentage of those students go to our comprehensive neighborhood high schools, the Overbrooks, the West Philadelphias, the Washington High School, the Northeast. What percentage are we looking at, and is there a disparity between the young people who go to those magnet schools compared to young people who go to traditional comprehensive neighborhood schools?
That's a great question, Councilman Thomas, and I have the aggregated data in a different fashion, but I can actually disaggregate, reaggregate the data to look at that in particular. We have actually disaggregated the data based upon the pathway chosen, not the actual school that it's associated with, but I can get that to you if you'd like it.
The reason I'm concerned with that, because I think about, a principal or administrator who might operate in a zip code, and I'm wondering if we have it broken down by zip code. Is it anything connected to poverty or socioeconomic disadvantages that might exist? Because if I'm a principal at Bartram, right, I might need a little more of a hug and a little more support than what the principal of Kappa might need. And, geographically, they're not the furthest from each other. But at the same time, I'm wondering, do we know what those differences will look like based on Mrs. Turner's study and the information that she communicated to us. I wanted to do two more things. I wanted Ms. Turner to go back to those 5 questions that she asked us at the end of her presentation so we can get ready to close out this panel. And I wanted to just revisit that to assure that we are on the right path as it relates to graduation requirement. And if there are no other questions from members of council, I do want to move on to the next panel at some point. But Ms. Turner, if you don't mind, I wanted to stick to what I said. Can we revisit those 5 questions you raised? Because I think they're important in today's conversation and making sure that we're on track to give all of our young people an opportunity to graduate.
Absolutely. I'll read them. I'll also put them in the chat, so you don't have to take notes. It can be distracting to try to write it down. I also threw in the chat a map that we created as part of the PERC report. It's interactive, so you can go in and look at the share of students at each high school who either met the Keystone requirements, or you can look at the share who met or almost met the requirements for the Keystone pathways by school. In the report, we took snapshots of the different school types and reported out that of the schools, there are only, I think, 13 that have a share of students that would have met the Keystone requirements. All of those are the schools that you're talking about, the criterion-based schools. So schools are going to be impacted differently across the district. And, it's important to know that the administrative burden of gathering all of the pieces of evidence is not going to be equally felt across schools, because there are some schools where the majority of the students will have the benefit of the Keystone system already being set up.
Listening to that, before we go into your questions, I'm sorry, Superintendent, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, I want to speak straight away to questions 1 and 2 from Dr. Turner, and perhaps Ms. Savage could speak to the others.
Absolutely. Before we do that, I'm wondering, right, based on what Dr. Turner just said, what is the $2 million that we've allocated from to the Commerce Department? How is that going to help address some of the, I guess you could say, discrepancies in schools? If we know that some schools will need a little more of a hug than other schools, I know our Commerce Director is here. The revenue that we've allocated to Commerce that's specifically earmarked to try to address this issue, will it be dispersed in a way that will provide more resources to the schools who have more young people who are more likely to have not met that original standard by passing the Keystones?
Ms. Savage?
Well, Ms. Nadal, would you like to go, or would you like me to?
Sure. Let me just start by saying that we will sort of take our guidance from the school district as to where those needs are the most, that they're the ones that are most familiar, obviously, with the needs of the district, and we will coordinate with them to make sure that the money is appropriated to meet the most urgent need.
Thank you for that. And also, just thinking about the PERC data and the fact that this was based upon the Keystone proficiency in 1819, that was prior to the pandemic. And from a district perspective, because we now have internal data around this particular school year, we can disaggregate that data by our learning networks in high schools as well, so that we can determine what the additional need is and equitably distribute the resources based upon those needs. And Councilman Thomas, I think you're absolutely correct. There's going to be some schools that need a different kind of support because of where their students are and the pathways that they're choosing to explore. What we have proposed with Commerce around actually making sure we're utilizing the funds to satisfy the needs of those students was intentional. And the other portion of the funds where we're really looking at standing up a system so that our schools will have access to ready-made internships, externships, and cooperative opportunities will be a huge lift off of those schools, because currently they're doing those matches using school district staff.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just add specific to the first 2 questions. The first question, as I understood it, was what is the status of the system in the district to track and to communicate with parents? I've watched and been really pleased with how this team has, in a fairly short time period, developed some partners with Ms. Savage, our Chief Information Officer, Mel Harris, has worked around the clock with members of her team through our student information system, student information management system, to map out students and to cross-reference the different pathway and to get that information kind of matched up. It's taken a little time, but we're not where we need to be yet, but we're making significant progress. Our research and evaluation office under the leadership of Dr. Tanya Walford is also helping to do a fidelity check, if you will, to make sure that what we're doing is accurate. So we're having to make sure we have good information in. Now, in terms of how we talk with parents in a district with 120,000 students overall in 59 high schools and the number of seniors we have, it's not efficient for the 440 office to talk specifically to the thousands of parents specifically. So we're trying to do a better job of supporting principals and counselors who, one, are at the school building level, who, two, parents know and trust more than they know and trust people who don't work at the school, to make sure they have what they need so they can talk with parents in real time. It's a work in progress, but we'll stay at that. And then second, do all schools have the capacity and have what is needed? It's a mixed bag. Some schools were much pre-pandemic. Some schools are much more resourced, had more capacity than others, and the pandemic just exacerbated that. So I would just say it varies based on school, and your point is well taken, that a Masterman does not have the same level of challenge or the kind of challenge that Bartram or West Philadelphia or Overbrook may have, and we're recognizing that and doing our best to deploy the resources. I really want to defer to the deputy superintendent and her team to have enough autonomy to figure out what resources need to go where in working with our partners. And so I'll defer to her if she wants to say more about that.
And for us, I don't think it's about what resources go where. I think it's the timeline that concerns us. We're not questioning the competency of the people involved. Okay. We're questioning the timeline, because at the end of the day, it's December and we're about to go into the holiday season. We'll come back. Time is flying. Superintendent, it seems like you just got here, and you didn't just get here, and that's an example of what I'm talking about with time flying. So I think more or less the timeline is the concern. When do we expect to move people from out the red, so to say, into the green, so that we know that they've transitioned? Do we expect all young people to have everything they need by April?
The school district has had up until last year, the highest four-year graduation rate has been 70%. That means 30% don't graduate in 4 years, but some of those graduate in 5 and some graduate in 6. We've got to get more of our kids than 70% to graduate in 4. 1. 2, your point is well taken. We have a fierce sense of urgency. We are tracking the data regularly. We're happy to share out more widely than us to make sure that parents, or if the education committee would like to have more frequent reports, we're very happy to do that.
And to follow up on that as well, I understand what you're saying around the timeline. This data actually will be changing on a regular basis, because we have kids that, will meet an evidence-based pathway literally next week. We have other students that will sit for NOCD exams in March and April, and we'll see that they have passed them, and they'll meet that piece of evidence. We're still waiting for the first real round of college acceptance letters to come through. So there's a number of different pieces of evidence that will actually impact the timeline around when students are actually meeting these Act 158 pathways. I do want to impress upon council that it is not the intent of the district for Act 158 to be a barrier to graduation. This, I think, is doable. We can make sure that the students actually have what they need in terms of Act 158. We are also going to continue to pay attention to credit attainment so that students meet pieces in order to graduate in June effectively. But I do have an actual number for you, and it's unfortunate I couldn't share the rest of the slides because we had this data ready for council. We currently have 3,897 high school seniors that are still in progress for meeting an Act 158 pathway. We have 4,223 students that have already met an Act 158 pathway. So you see that the number of seniors that are leaning.
Repeat those numbers one more time.
Absolutely. 3,897 students are in progress, which means that they are endeavoring right now to meet one of the 5 Act 158 pathways. We have 4,223 students that have already met an Act 158 pathway. The other thing that's important too, just because I'm an advocate for children, even if it's met a pathway, we want to make sure they can explore others too.
Right. So if you've only met one pathway, that's still not enough, right?
It is.
So you only have to meet one pathway.
You only have to meet one pathway to graduate. One pathway.
Outside of the credit credentials.
Correct.
Okay. So we only have about 3,000 students that are in progress. So outside of the 3,000 students in progress and the 4,000 who've already met, there are no other students that we need to account for. So we only really need to focus on the 3,000 that are in progress. That's it.
It's the 3,008. It's more like I want to say.
It wasn't exactly 3,000, but
yeah, 3,900. I want to be. I'm exact about my numbers, Councilman.
I'm sorry. I apologize. So you're between 3,000 and 4,000 students. That's really our focus of today's conversation, and that's really the focus of the work that we have to do between now and graduation. Is that correct?
That is correct. And of those students, there are a number that are going to actually sit for CTE exams, for example. There's another set of students that are, waiting graduation, college acceptance letters. There's going to be a mix of students that slot into the 3, 4, and 5 pathways, the CTE, the alternative assessment, and then the evidence-based assessment. Those are the students that we're working with now to create plans.
Let me ask you this. Will there be an opportunity for a delayed graduation for any young person who might be in the process? I'm talking about the 3,000 to 4,000 number who might be in the midst of the process but doesn't complete it by the time their school graduation happens. Will there be mechanisms in place for them to be able to complete it in the summertime and have maybe a delayed graduation option?
And we do typically have some level of summer programming available. I think our internal conversation right now is around what does graduation then look like for those students, because we don't want to penalize them, for example, from participating in the actual graduation exercises if we're seeing that they're struggling with the 158 pathway. So we are still investigating and thinking through that.
Okay. All right. So this is the last question, and then I would like Dr. Turner to go through her 5 questions again so we can all feel good about what she said we need to be thinking about, because I think we've answered most of them. For us on the city council side, we get a constituent who comes to us, they're concerned about their young person not graduating. Who is our point of contact to be able to help walk a parent or a child through the process if they come to our office and we want to stay connected with a particular young person throughout the course of their journey? Who is the contact for council members to work with throughout the course of this academic year?
Well, I want to actually acknowledge Dr. Malika Brooks and her team, because they are actually on the call as well, and they have done a lot of the lift around the district policy piece for council members in particular. You can email Dr. Brooks if you have a concern around a particular constituent, and she can actually attach you to the staff that are doing this work, and we can track the students from the central administrative office level. Of course, thinking about student confidentiality and, privacy rights, but making sure that they are leading you through that process.
Dr. Brooks is with us right now?
She is. She's on here.
Oh, man, that's great. I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to hear from her. I love working with Dr. Brooks and her team. She's amazing. But that's good. Colleagues, I can assure you that if Dr. Brooks is our point of contact, we're definitely in good hands as it relates to serving constituents and providing them with what they come to our office with, so we can ensure that we can help get them answers. So that's a great point of contact to have. And thank you so much, Deputy Superintendent. We appreciate it. Can we close out? I know our superintendent has to go pretty soon. Can we go ahead, Superintendent, if you wanted to, any final remarks?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you very much for allowing Deputy Superintendent myself, Deputy Superintendent Savage and myself the opportunity to testify, provide our testimony today. I do want to note just a couple of things really quickly. I know we're at time. My understanding is that that districts may exempt up to 5% of students for appropriate reasons. I believe, I don't know if Dr. Turner mentioned that or not, but that's my understanding of my read of the Act 158 piece. Second, of that 3,800 plus number of students that the deputy superintendent talked about, there's not one that we're not committed to getting across the finish line. Because we say, well, we wouldn't want that to be Councilmember Thomas's child or son or daughter that doesn't get across the finish line. And certainly wouldn't want it to be Ms. Savage's son or daughter. So we're focused on that. The other thing is the reason, Mr. Chairman, we are working so diligently on this dropout issue in our attendance rates in the school right now and not waiting for a strategic plan is because we know that kids who are in attendance, who don't drop out, who are making progress, have a much greater likelihood to graduate. And then finally, the Neubauer Family Foundation put out a report. They commissioned a study in 2019, and we talked about this at the board meeting last night. Board President Streeter allowed us to talk about this at the board meeting last night. The study found that in the city of Philadelphia, aside from the moral reason to get all of our kids graduated and make sure that they're prepared for the world of work and college, if they choose to do so, the cost to the city of Philadelphia for a dropout over the lifetime is $405,000, according to that very current study. And so it just makes all the sense in the world from a moral standpoint, safety standpoint, and certainly from an economic standpoint. So I just want to let you know that we're going to double down, put every resource we can on this issue to get our young people across that line, across the stage for graduation.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. We appreciate your due diligence. I'm pretty sure we'll be having ongoing conversations around this issue. It feels good to know that we're getting out there early. It's not even 2023 yet, and we're already having in-depth dialogue, regular meetings, departments meeting cross sectors. So this is encouraging. Before we close out, and I will also apologize to the tech team and to the folks using the chat feature, because I was condoning that. I thought it was good to share that information, but I did. Because of the Sunshine Act, the chat feature can only be used by the council members. So tech team, I apologize for that. I got so in depth into this conversation and so much information sharing that was my fault. Dr. Turner, can we close this panel out with your 5 questions? And then we can move on to the next panel. And I just want to thank you for your research and also for investing in our school district, not just with your intellect, but with your own children as well, too. I did hear you say that you're a parent of a school district child, and there's nothing like that. So we appreciate you.
Keep expecting her to walk in because I hear her outside. So in the Nebinger uniform. All right. So the first 2 questions, Dr. Watlington just reiterated, but I'll read for everyone's sake. What is the status of the system that the district has built to communicate with families and partners about the policy and tracking that evidence towards graduation? And I'll caveat this to say that, the district enrolls many students in Philadelphia, but not all students. So there are a lot of other systems that should need attention to make sure that all students have access to pathways in Philly, even if they're not attending a district school. Do all schools have the capacity and knowledge to counsel students about their status and options, to gather existing or forthcoming pieces of evidence, and to populate the system with it? If not, what capacity is needed and where? And what resources are needed to support these efforts in the short and long term? I think Dr. Savage's figure, the 3,800 or 3,897 students, be good to know what schools they attend and what resources those schools need in the short term. What existing resources and experiences will count as evidence for alternative pathways? I've read the policy 3 million times. I feel like I couldn't answer this question. It's complicated. So getting clarity on what counts is important. And making sure, the 4th question is, do external partners know if what they offer students count? And also what kind of documentation or evidence they need to be producing for students so that they can make sure their experiences are recognized. And the 5th one is really about looking beyond what we already have that counts. And there's a lot out there that does, but where the gaps might be. So what new or expanded resources and experience do we need to make sure all students have access to pathways that make sense for them. So, for example, if now students can demonstrate a piece of evidence by passing, for meeting a score threshold for a SAT, how much does it cost to take an SAT? Are there resources that we can make sure students have so that the cost of a test is not a barrier to graduation, for example?
Thank you, Dr. Turner. I appreciate it. And I think when you listen to those questions, of course, they're on point. They can help guide us as we do this work. I think we got the first couple questions pat down, but we probably still got a little more work to do around those last two, identifying exactly what counts. Because after listening to all this, I feel like we are a little more prepared than I thought we were coming into the conversation, but we definitely still have some holes that need to be filled. And I think that it's important that we circle back around early next year to be able to, because there you go, right on cue, Dr. Turner, you called it. But what we need to do is be able to identify, like you said, what counts, so we know what the gaps are, and we could be able to supplement those areas as soon as possible. So thank you, everybody, for participating in this conversation. Colleagues, thank you for your questions. I think that this was very productive. It gives the listening public, an idea of where we are as a city, but it also lets us know internally what work that we still have to do in order to make sure all of our young people are successful. And whether we agree with everything or not, I think that listening to everybody's passion, no one can question anyone's intention as it relates to wanting the best for our children. And I think that's something that we all have in common. So I look forward to continuing to work with you. And I do want to just give the mic to the superintendent to see if you had any last comments or questions from any other members of this panel before we move on to the next panel.
No more comments, Mr. Chairman, other than say thank you. Again, we want to thank you for that efforts for that $2 million investment. We need every penny we can get, and we're being good stewards of those dollars. Secondly, to your point about hitting the ground running in January, we are planning an update report to the Board of Education at our January meeting. So we'll be following up with Board President Streeter under his leadership, and we'll have more updates for you when we return after the winter break. And again, thank you for your time today.
Any other questions from members of the committee for this particular panel? Hearing none, I want to say thank you all for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your expertise. And most importantly, thank you for caring about all of our children. I do want to take a moment of privilege to congratulate our new board chair, Chair Streeter. It was referenced a few times on this panel, but formally from myself, the chair of the Education Committee, as well as my colleagues on City Council, we just want to say congratulations on the position, and to let you know that we look forward to working with you and looking at your leadership to help guide us in the right direction. So before we go to the panel, I just want to give our new board chair, Chair Streeter, an opportunity to say any remarks that he might want to say or to add anything that he may want to add to the conversation. And I know there are other board members on the call as well, too, and listening in. So to all of the board members, we just want to say thank you, because at the end of the day, that volunteer position is a very difficult job and very time consuming, and you all do it and do it with a smile. Board Chair Streeter.
First, thank you for the congratulations, and congratulations to you, good brother, for chairing the Education Committee for the City Council. I just wanted to say I personally appreciate the care and concern, as you've seen, that the governing body has illustrated by calling this meeting, the City Council. No one can say that Philadelphia does not care about education or its students. I would also just like to say that I've witnessed the intense care and concern of this district and its board as it relates to our children. So we collectively take our responsibility seriously, and our attention is steadfast and laser focused on mitigating any and all harms to all of our students, and on this topic and any other topic. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to working with you.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe, Mr. President Streeter, I believe I saw your vice president here as well. I believe I saw Mallory Fix Lopez here as well.
Yeah, she's here.
Let's take a minute to congratulate her as well, too. And I don't want to put her on the spot and force any comments. Of course, if she wants to comment, she can raise her hand and I'll definitely recognize her. But yes, definitely congratulations, and looking forward to your leadership, expertise, and experience as a former educator and or still educator, because I know you're teaching at CCP. So thank you for all you do for the city of Philadelphia, and we look forward to working with you and your leadership. And Superintendent, thank you, sir. I appreciate you for tagging her as well, too. Madam Clerk, can you please call, unless our vice chair wants to speak? I don't see her queued up. Okay. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next panel and the next set of witnesses for this particular resolution?
Yes, the second panel is Sarah Steltz and Farah Farnese.
Good morning. Please state your name for the record and you may begin with your testimony.
Are you able to hear me?
We are, yes.
Okay. And is my camera working?
It's in and out, but we hear you clearly, so you can begin with your testimony, and I'm sure somebody from the tech team can figure that out. I definitely can. So I'll apologize for that in advance.
Okay, it is probably on my end, so I apologize, but I will get started. Thanks for having me today. As a school district parent myself, I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this critical issue. My name is Sarah Steltz, and I'm the Vice President of Economic Competitiveness at the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. In my role, I lead many of the Chamber's talent initiatives. I'm here today to offer the Chamber's support. For more than 10 years, the Chamber has worked with its member companies to strengthen their participation in summer youth employment programs. Chamber members have actively engaged in career exposure and internship programs through both financial contributions and paid employment experiences in their workplaces. Their engagement has ultimately led to thousands of paid work experiences for Philadelphia youth. And we certainly have not done this alone. We have had the opportunity to serve on the Summer Youth Employment Cabinet, a public-private partnership led by the Urban Affairs Coalition and PYN. And for the Chamber itself and many of the organizations within our membership, these actions go far beyond corporate social responsibility. Preparing the future workforce is a business imperative. Every day I speak with employers that have unmet talent needs, and in some cases they're seeking to fill hundreds of jobs, whether those jobs are remote or in person. Of course, we want to provide immediate solutions for employers who are experiencing labor shortages, and we recognize that it puts an incredible strain on their business, but it also presents us with an opportunity. More employers are thinking differently about how their approaches to talent, long-standing hiring practices, how these hiring practices are changing. And sometimes it's as a result of the tight labor market, and sometimes it's because, I'm going to try a different camera here. Sorry, apologies. Okay, are you able to see me now? There you go. So sometimes their practices are changing because of the tight labor market, and sometimes it's because they have increasing awareness of inclusive hiring and employment practices. And employers are more open than ever to a conversation about fulfilling their talent needs in new and creative ways. And the talent that exists within our youth workforce is one of the solutions that we as a community need to be prepared to present to employers so that they can readily engage. And I think at the Chamber, we're in a unique position. We have many of the region's key employers seated at our various tables, and we're prepared to be part of the solution. We are committed to continuing to play that employer engagement role that I mentioned, bringing consistent attention to this issue and rallying employer support and participation. We will join any citywide table developing a path forward. And I think as part of that citywide table, what the Chamber can proactively provide industry insights with the educational community. Just because of the nature of our work, we have critical quantitative and qualitative information about the emerging sectors and the needs of the employers within those industries. We'd like to open up a dialogue to ensure that educators and counselors have real-time intelligence about those jobs, which are Philadelphia's future. Additionally, I think that we have an opportunity to collaborate on professional development and preparation for youth. We'd like to take part in a coordinated and research approach to youth preparation. The best sustainability plan for my money for any workforce program, whether it's an adult program or a youth program, is a positive experience for the employer and the participant. And I think the Chamber can play a role in ensuring that preparation activities reflect employer needs and expectations so we can improve outcomes and increase program adoption. In closing today, just this week, major employers that I spoke to within our membership, like PICO and Citizens Bank and Drexel and Bank of America, they've all reaffirmed their commitment to engaging on this issue, the issue of youth employment, and creating opportunities within their workplaces. And we look forward to developing a collaborative plan that not only addresses Act 158 requirements, but creates a comprehensive and sustainable pathway that positions Philadelphia's youth for long-term success. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Before we open up to any questions, I want to let the other member of the panel communicate their testimony, and then after that, we'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Councilperson Thomas and the rest of the group. My name is Farah Bernese Roma, and I am the Vice President of Programs at the Philadelphia Youth Network. My testimony today will really be about how the Philadelphia Youth Network can continue to be a willing partner in these conversations about youth workforce employment, preparation, and education supports. The Philadelphia Youth Network is a nonprofit here locally. We were established in 1999, and since then we have offered over 200,000 quality opportunities for education and employment opportunities in the city of Philadelphia. We believe every young person deserves the chance to cultivate their talents, and the more opportunities that are available for youth, the better for the city of Philadelphia. Our role in the system is to build systemic solutions that close the gap, to support and train youth-serving organizations to deliver high-quality programming, to engage employers and system leaders and ensure that young people are prepared to join tomorrow's workforce, similar to what Sarah had just mentioned, and then to design comprehensive service networks to prepare youth for successful futures for school and life. We are also the managing partner of Work Ready Philadelphia, which is the citywide summer youth workforce initiative, and that offers programs for young people 12 to 24, both during the summer and in the school year. Last summer alone, we had over 7,600 opportunities offered to young people and compensated at nearly $8 million to young people across the city in the 6 weeks alone. I am here to share one and address one element that drawing a blank, that was mentioned at the beginning of the conversation around evidence and what evidence can be offered. I am here to share to the hearing today that we are working with the School District of Philadelphia to provide certification of the close to 20,000 young people who would meet certification between 2018 and 2022 of the elements outlined in Pathway 5 for either internship or service learning. These are not comprehensive of every single student since it does go back from 2018, but any young person who is in need of that element for graduation, we will provide that certification list in early January to the district so that they can add that to any individual's graduation plan who may need that, both for the current seniors as well as any participant that may need it in future graduation. We are also willing to continue to support efforts with the district on identifying and connecting young people who need summer work opportunities or school year work opportunities through the Work Ready system, and get them into those opportunities in a seamless and streamlined way. We're excited to continue those conversations and partner with the district on that. I think, as Sarah mentioned, Philadelphia Youth Network is interested and willing to join whatever citywide table where discussions about cross-functional activities and partnerships where we're working together and not siloed by organization. We're very excited to hear the work of the chamber and the work of the district and are excited to work about how we cross-functionally work together.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee for anyone on this particular panel? So just one question before we close out. First of all, thank you both for your willingness to collaborate, as well as the organizations that you represent, for your willingness to collaborate and make yourself available for our students across the city of Philadelphia. One of the questions that was presented was just around getting clarity of what counts. I'm wondering, based on the fact that we're still trying to figure out exactly what counts and what doesn't count, how do you know exactly what services and opportunities you'll be able to offer, and what you'll be able to do as it relates to helping young people get across the finish line. Like, help the folks that are listening and the folks who are stakeholders in the education space, help them understand exactly what you know for sure you can do to offset any young person who's in that 3,000 to 4,000 category that haven't met the standardized test requirement. What can they lean on between the chamber and PYN as it relates to meeting another pillar so that they can have what they need to graduate?
Sure, I can jump in first. Through partnership with the School District of Philadelphia, we have certified that participants in work-ready programs, PYN managed programs, as well as programs facilitated by Philadelphia Works and Office of Children and Families that may not be under the larger work-ready umbrella. Programs that were offered between 2018 and 2022 and August of 2022 that have offered at least 50 hours of work under an internship opportunity or completion of 70% of a service learning or incentive-based opportunity will meet the certification outlined by the district. We will be providing the district with that certified list, at least of the Philadelphia Youth Network's participation by the early January. And I know the district is working with each other individual entity to report on those kind of past post-dated opportunities to go towards graduation. Moving forward, we are excited to work with the school district about how we may combine our efforts and ensure that the future work-ready opportunities are also satisfying the district's requirements and documentation that is needed to meet the guidelines and the requirements as of September of 2022.
Great answer. Thank you. Sarah, did you want to add anything, or do you feel like she covered everything?
I think she covered it, and chamber employers will participate in the system that is provided, and they'll engage as they've already committed to the opportunities and beyond, hopefully the levels that they've participated in the past. So no, I think that is definitely sufficient. Thanks, Farah.
I think based on the testimony that I'm hearing, it sounds like our biggest obstacles are, again, going back to the questions that the doctor presented us, making sure that we have clarity on everything that counts. And even when it talks about filling in the gaps, I mean, we have so many people who've been willing to come to the table, the transparency and the information and making sure it's available, making sure schools and parents and students know that all these options exist seems like it's going to be our biggest hurdle. I'm wondering from the team at Commerce, is $2 million enough? Should we be thinking about some type of public service announcements or some type of campaign that puts us in a position where, and maybe not public service announcements, maybe it's a different form of paid advertisement. Should there be some type of social media ads? I don't know, but we might make it a little more creative. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Councilman or Chair, Thomas. And I know there are a couple of folks from Commerce that are on this call that can add to what I'm saying. But as we developed the scope and the budget that when we submitted it for the mid-year transfer, part of that was a marketing campaign to really get the word out in creative ways. And it will be social media, I am sure. We will work in concert with the chamber and with the school district to make sure that we are sending a coordinated message. But part of the money is definitely anticipated to be for a marketing campaign.
That sounds great. And I know that there will be an appetite on council to ensure that we get this information out to folks. Because I think just listening to where we are, again, still have some work to do. But
no question.
The biggest issue is going to be making sure that people have this information. Chair recognizes Councilmember Lazat.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to the Commerce Department. My recommendation was going to be to the Commerce Department to reach out to those corridor managers that you all have on the street. I mentioned earlier to the earlier panel that I had an opportunity to work with some students over the course of last summer, and 20 of them were actually placed in some of our corridor businesses, and several of them were hired after their internship opportunity. And so, all we need to do is ask. There are so many people, like Councilman Phillips mentioned earlier, that want to help young people. They want to keep young people out of trouble and keep them really busy. And if college is not the option, then we need to find them an alternative. We have those alternatives right in our neighborhood, walking distance from many of their homes. And so please take advantage of those corridor businesses who are really interested in hiring local.
Thank you for that. Yes, we will definitely be working with our networks that are already established to also get the word out beyond what we'll do with the chamber. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. I agree. Great suggestion. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for this particular panel? Hearing none, I want to say thank you for your patience. I know that that last panel was a little lengthy, but more importantly, thank you for being a resource to our school district, our students, our administrators, teachers, and other stakeholders. We truly appreciate you coming to the table and helping us think through exactly what do we do to address this issue as it relates to high school graduation. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, as we begin to invite the last panel, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize you. For those who don't know, our clerk here today is a former intern in my office who's already graduated, who's here today to clerk not only because she cares about this issue, but also because, and not only she cares about this issue, she's been working on this issue, but also we thought it would be appropriate to show what our young people can do when given the proper support systems and proper adults around them, how they can put themselves in a position to do some of the great work, if not better work, than what we do as adults. So, Madam Clerk, thank you for being here. Thank you for volunteering to be our clerk for this session here today. And more importantly, thank you for being an example to other high school students all across the city of Philadelphia as it relates to what a quality internship and what quality professional experience can do for you as you transition from one level of academia to another. So you've been amazing. Let's go to our last panel. And let's get ready to finalize our phenomenal conversation that we're having today. Madam Clerk.
Thank you so much for that recognition. The third and final panel is Monica Hawk, Scott Peterman, and Carrie Blackman.
We're going to ask you to just communicate your testimony consecutively. Please start by stating your name. And at the end of all three of our witnesses for this particular panel, I'll open it up to questions for council members on this committee.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Hawk, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at One Bright Ray Community High Schools. And I'm here to represent both the charter schools as well as alternative schools within the city of Philadelphia. One Bright Ray Community High Schools function as an accelerated alternative program contracted by the Philadelphia School District. As part of the Opportunity Network, we serve students who are overaged and undercredited. At our program, we have students ages 16 through 21, as well as adult programs for 18 and up, as students work towards their diplomas after considerable struggles in traditional schools. Because we are an accelerated alternative school, we have graduates at the end of each trimester. We have been embarking on this Act 158 work for over a year, knowing that we would see the first graduates of the class of 2023 by the end of November. As you've heard, the Act 153 graduation pathways can be confusing and overwhelming for students, parents, and school personnel. As a school that has been doing this work for more than a year, I'd like to share some of our perspective with you. The first two pathways of Act 158, as you've heard, revolve around passing Keystone exams in algebra, biology, and literature. The most recent Keystone data in the city of Philadelphia is pre-pandemic, during the 2018-2019 school year, when only 41% of students scored proficient in literature, 28% scored proficient in biology, and a mere 20% of students scored proficient in algebra. Keep in mind, these less than desirable results were prior to the COVID-19 pandemic that stunted academic growth throughout America. Clearly, while schools push towards academic excellence and strive for Keystone proficiency, no school can assume that all of their students would meet one of these two Keystone pathways. You've also heard that there are three alternative pathways. One is for CTE programs. And obviously, not every charter or alternative school has capability to meet that pathway. The fourth pathway, the alternative assessment pathway, offers students other exam opportunities to show academic promise, such as the SAT, the ACT, advanced placement exams, and the ASVAB for military-minded students. While offering cannot score proficient on a Keystone exam, scoring the required range of scores on these larger exams is also a difficult task. Not to mention, all of the exams in that category have an additional financial component. So asking students or parents to pay upwards of $70 for an exam and hope for a score to meet this pathway is often not feasible and presents Philadelphia schools and their students with an inequitable financial burden. So most students in the city of Philadelphia will probably earn their diploma using the fifth and final pathway, the evidence-based pathway. As you've heard, students must demonstrate post-secondary and career readiness by earning 3 pieces of evidence, such as approved industry-recognized credentials, completing an internship, receiving acceptance into a 2-year college program, which requires no remedial coursework, or completing a dual enrollment course while still in high school. Most schools should consider providing these opportunities to the majority of their students in the event that the other 4 pathways are not attainable by the student's graduation date. However, again, the financial cost to either the student or the school is great when considering these pieces of evidence. The manpower lift of tracking each student and his or her individual pathway and goals is another task the students must address head on in order to secure the graduation these students deserve. This unprecedented heavy lift is often shouldered by counselors who are simultaneously adjusting to this new mandate while already tripling their efforts to support Philadelphia students dealing with the multiple layers of trauma from COVID-19. So how did One Bright Ray do this work? As I said, we've been working at it for more than a year. We've studied Act 158 inside and out to make sure we knew what would count and what would not. We've adjusted job descriptions, hired more personnel, and revamped our programming to accommodate for providing evidence of Pathway 5. We've spent more than $25,000 this year alone on opportunities for students to earn industry-recognized credentials. We've purchased 800 seats for our students to earn OSHA credentials. We've hosted several CPR courses, again, so students can get that industry-recognized credential. We've expanded our community partnership department to double our internship capacity, working with PYN to make sure that our interns are able to be paid while getting their internship. And we're also in negotiations with colleges to provide dual enrollment programs in-house at our schools. All of this occurs without central office referrals and assistance. Instead, it relies for the alternative schools as well as the charter schools on our own connections, research, and manpower. So on November 23rd, 2022, One Bright Ray celebrated their first graduating class of 2023. To our knowledge, it was probably one of the first in the city of Philadelphia for this year. We had 39 of our graduates who earned their 23.5 credits, completed their multidisciplinary project. But even more to celebrate is all 39 of those students also met their Act 158 pathway. Breaking down the data, we had 4 students who did meet the Keystone pathways, either Keystone Proficiency or Keystone Composite. The other 5 students met the evidence-based pathway. While we rejoice in this accomplishment, we can't let off the gas pedal for 1 minute because we continue to push to ensure that our 70+ graduates who are scheduled for mid-March will be just as successful as this first round. From our experience, we can attest to the incredible financial cost of embarking on this work, and even more so the manpower needed to encourage, prepare, and support each individual student on his or her self-selected career or college pathway. This endeavor cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach, which certainly pushes each school to get creative in the work. Charter schools and alternative schools particularly do not have a large central office staff to develop programming, foster partnerships, negotiate costs of programs, or track every small detail involved in Act 158. So charter schools and alternative schools require significantly more funding and personnel in order to meet our students where they are and prepare them for the success they deserve. We need to continue to create partnerships within the city of Philadelphia to provide opportunities for our students to earn these pieces of evidence and encourage them. Because as we've seen at One Bright Ray, meeting Act 158 is possible. It's a heavy lift, but it is completely possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Will the next witness on this panel please start by stating your name and you may begin with your testimony?
Scott Peterman, and I am the CEO of Philadelphia Charters for Excellence. And good afternoon, members of the Education Committee. I want to first thank you for inviting me to testify before you today on this important topic. As I just mentioned, my name is Scott Peterman, and I'm the CEO of Philadelphia Charters for Excellence, or PCE, which is a 501c3 nonprofit membership organization that works to connect, convene, and catalyze collective action on behalf of Philadelphia's public charter schools and the families they serve. PCE's membership community is an alliance that encompasses 80 of the 83 brick and mortar charter schools who collectively educate nearly 65,000 public school students at more than 100 campuses across the city. Founded in 2011, today PCE serves as a central advocate for public policy and legislation that directly or indirectly affect Pennsylvania charter schools. We also serve as a nexus for public-private community partnerships and a focal point for resources and inclusive, collaborative knowledge sharing for Philadelphia's public charter school ecosystem. Of our PCE member schools, 31 serve approximately 5,500 students in 12th grade and are all working diligently to prepare the class of 2023 to receive their high school diplomas by meeting the new Act 158 state graduation requirements. As each charter school acts as its own local education agency, their approaches to achieving success on this new pathway to graduation are unique and individual to their respective charter communities. However, what is universal is that at the end of the school year, all of our charters will have to comply with the graduation requirements included in Act 58. For PCE, our work around this began earlier in the calendar year when we successfully advocated for the expansion of Pennsylvania's dual enrollment program to finally include public charter high schools so that all public school students could truly access this important dual enrollment pathway as an alternative source for graduation. In August of this year, in anticipation of this being the activation year for Act 158, PCE partnered with the Mayor's Office of Education, the Philadelphia Commerce Department, and our member charter high schools to conduct working sessions and informational debriefs around the complexity of these 5 different pathways. At that time, it was apparent that our school leaders were aware of the requirements and had already been implementing systems within their respective schools to prepare their students based on individual situations. But nonetheless, we're still feeling understandably anxious about burdening these students with yet another high-pressure requirement in this weird return to a normal school year post-pandemic. In addition, since the start of the school year, PCE has been working continuously across the region's public and private sectors to accelerate the flow of knowledge, innovation, and access to opportunity between our Philadelphia charter school students and the city's renowned institutions, anchor agencies, and cutting-edge companies to widen these opportunities. These internships, externships, and pre-apprentice partnerships expand on what our city charter high schools are already doing to further ensure all of our public schools, high school students have equal opportunity and access to 21st century career experiences across the city's innovation economy. While time does not allow me today to offer more than a surface level overview, I'm more than happy to provide an in-depth briefing for committee members at a later date if you're interested on the details and opportunities we see around PCE's collaborative pathway partnerships we have in development that should begin to launch officially in January of next year. These include partnerships with Temple University's College of Education and Human Development, HopeWorks Kensington's dual enrollment pilot program, and Community College of Philadelphia's CATC program. I'm also happy to share details at a later date on PCE's new city and sector-wide workforce development pipeline initiative called STEM for Sustainability that will be working in partnership with former Pennsylvania State Board of Education member Dr. Jamie Bracy Green and who is also the founder of CEO of Think and Grow Solutions. This opportunity will allow, excuse me, this opportunity will allow new college and career readiness pathways and the ability to develop a collaborative K-12 education pilot that will begin model within a subset of targeted PCE schools that can then help shape an internal train-the-trainer model to scale pathways consistently and equitably across our public charter school ecosystem. Similar to the district, for most of our leaders, the most significant concern with the requirements of Act 158 was the reliance of standardized tests, specifically Keystone and SATs, which many of our public school students in Philadelphia have traditionally struggled with compared to more affluent peers in other school districts in the suburbs. At this time, we do not have individual data from all of our school members or from all of our member schools in regards to how many of their students are well on the path to meeting the requirements of Act 58. Leaders have, however, indicated that at this point in the year, while this data is not available, they do have high hopes that they should have pretty close to full compliance within the year's end. Currently, as the district representatives on today's committee hearing already mentioned, a number of our students are currently waiting for college acceptances or are actively engaging in job readiness endeavors or internships already that are not yet complete and have yet to take the Keystones or other assessments this year, which is why the data is not quite available to share out today. Therefore, while we don't know exactly what the full impact of Act 158 will ultimately be on this school year and the graduating school seniors this year, we are happy to provide a further update at another committee hearing. What we do know is that Philadelphia's public brick and mortar charter schools are taking this very seriously and maximizing every resource, staffing capacity, and alternative pathway options within their school communities that they're able to. They embrace high standards and accountability for their students and work creatively and diligently to provide their staff with the tools and resources they need to get the class of 2023 and beyond across the graduation stage. We at PCE will continue to seek opportunities for increased career program access, dual enrollment access, operational support, CTE opportunities, and other programs which aim to further empower our schools and students equitably. In closing, I want to thank you again for this opportunity to present today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Hello, my name is Kerry, and I'm a school district of Philadelphia educator and parent. Just thank you for allowing me to testify today. I really appreciate that. I believe that Act 158, which many of us within schools simply refer to as pathways, was created with the intent to provide students with the opportunity to graduate based on individual strengths and interests and be prepared for varying post-secondary opportunities. But as Act 158 is implemented, I personally have had some great concerns about the policy and just the effects that it could have on my children, both my biological children and my children that, within my school building. Pathways has not been appropriately introduced and explained to families and caretakers within our school district. Families are, encouraged and supposed to be partners in students' education. And my fear is that the lack of communication about pathways to families could have a negative effect on how students interpret and understand the importance that this law has on them. I received pathways invitations to informal sessions from the school district that occurred during October and November. And I'm speaking of my biological child. I did not receive an email, a text, or letter, nothing from a counselor and no teachers, principals, vice principals, just about these new requirements for graduation. Any knowledge that I have gained about pathways, I received because I'm an educator who works within a high school in Philadelphia. I wonder about the children who do not have the privilege to have a parent who's an educator. I know that the school district and individual schools have been trying their best to get information to families, but realizing how important pathways are to students and their futures, it could be something that it should be something that's consistently being provided to parents through a variety of methods. I think especially about McKinney-Vento students, and for those who don't know, those are students who have inconsistent housing, and just how they and their families and caretakers are receiving information. I'm assuming that since the school district's last information session was in November, it's now up to individual schools to get the information out, and individual schools do not have the capacity or the manpower to do that kind of work. Another concern is the ability of students to actually attain some of the evidence that could be required of them to graduate. And, this is something that was talked about a few times, this evening. For example, students who could qualify for graduation using a pathway that requires an industry-recognized credential, such as SafeServe or OSHA, have financial obligations attached to them, and just to get them. And my question is it the expectation for families to pay for these certifications? There has not been any clearly expressed plan for how students and their families could go about getting these certificates if they are unable to pay for them but needed them in order to fulfill the requirements for graduation. At my high school, my principal said that he would be willing to use school funds to help students get these certificates. That is not something that all high schools have the ability to do. And I am unsure if this is another thing that an individual high school should be responsible for. Funds are needed in order to make sure that students can pay for the credentials and are needed for them to graduate. Undocumented students are another area of concern that I have in just thinking about pathways. Again, much of the evidence needed in order to satisfy pathways are requirements that undocumented students would not easily attain due to their status. Things like college acceptances and letters guaranteeing full-time employment and acceptance into like dual enrollment and courses and programs are not things that someone who's undocumented necessarily has access to. What are undocumented students supposed to do, and how can schools confidently support them without dehumanizing and embarrassing them? We need to ensure that the requirements are attainable for all students, regardless of immigration status. Again, I understand that the intent of pathways is to provide various lanes for students to graduate with the hopes of allowing students to hone in on personal strengths and interests. But my concern is that pathways, due to some implementation and just oversight on how it could negatively impact some of our more vulnerable students within our district, it's just something I have a lot of concern about. I believe that it's our responsibility to ensure that all students have fair access to a high school diploma, and I hope something can just be worked out so that it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you to the entire panel. I think you all represent a number of different perspectives as it relates to the issue that we're facing and offer a variety of different experiences and resources. So I appreciate you being here. I do want to state for the record that our state rep and new Philadelphia delegation chair, State Rep Morgan Cephas, couldn't be here today, but she did provide written testimony that will be added to the record. Are there any questions from members of this committee for this particular panel? Okay, so just before we close out, I do want to say thank you for your patience and thank you for your testimony today. I think you all provided unique experiences and different perspective and really continue to challenge us. I know we have a current teacher here who was able to talk about it from the perspective of an educator. I think that's significantly important. And that was part of the concern that I communicated earlier. Just how do teachers feel? Do they feel like they're on an island? Has there been information made available? Monica, you and your team, the work that you're doing and the resources you've already put out there to try to make sure that young people are on a path to graduate, it's very much appreciated. And Scott, the coalition that you represent and your ability to articulate the perspective of a large group of institutions who too have to assure that they comply with this is very important, because we want to make sure all of our children are graduating from high school, whether they go to traditional comprehensive neighborhood schools, magnet schools, public charter schools, private schools. If you're a young person in the city of Philadelphia, we care deeply about your ability to be successful in life. And a big part of that starts with the ability to graduate from high school and continue your academic journey. So if there are no other questions from members of this committee, I'll ask this panel, is there anything else that we should be thinking about? Because I think that you all have given us a number of things to think about. And maybe we should have let you go first and then have the school district and the Commerce Department and a few other departments respond to some of the things that you've said here today. But what I will say is this is just the beginning of the conversation. We wanted to start this now because we know come 2023, that's one can argue that this is rather a late time to start the conversation. But we know by next year, that definitely would be problematic. But I think some of the things that we just listened to in this panel gave us even more charges as it relates to transparency, information being communicated, unexpected hurdles, thinking about undocumented students. That didn't even cross my mind. So it is, we have a lot more work to do. But I just want to give you all an opportunity to add anything that you felt like might have been missed or anything else that we're not thinking about. Are there any questions for members of council, or does anybody else that's a part of this last panel want to provide more context to the conversation today?
If I may, just in reference to Carrie's questions about undocumented students and McKinney-Vento students specifically, we do have a number of those students as well at One Bright Ray, and we did see them succeed as well. There is some creativity in the evidence-based pathway on things that you can have students complete. For instance, industry-recognized credentials do not require, undocumented students can earn industry-recognized credentials. And if they earn more than one, that counts as more than one piece of evidence as well. So there are some things in there that we can be successful in, but again, it takes that creativity and looking at each individual student as an individual. That's the hard part. Is we can't make a one-size-fits-all program for our students. We really need to see them for who they are, and it takes that manpower and financial lift and the community partnerships to do so. So it is possible, just a heavy lift.
Thank you. Thank you for that context.
I just add?
Yeah, Scott, please.
I just add briefly, this isn't anything new per se, but to reiterate the sentiment and the advice of the last panel, and the first panel as well for that matter, is the importance of convening key stakeholders just like today, in this hearing today, and continuing those opportunities in a consistent manner that brings everyone to the table so that you can have these citywide collaborative partnerships going on to really maximize the resources that we have across the public and private sectors. Because I think this is, a big lift, but it definitely presents a huge opportunity to really engage holistically the entire public education ecosystem of Philadelphia in what it should be, not just what it is today.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Scott. Thanks for the advocacy. I think that's something that we definitely need to do, so thank you. Okay, so are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Oh, council member. Okay. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Azan.
I just want to say thank you so much for bringing up the immigrant population. I'm sorry I didn't think about that either, but it is important to recognize that sometimes there's a huge language barrier. There's also a huge trust barrier as it relates to some of these students and their families. And so just like I encouraged the last panel to reach out to some of the folks that manage some of those corridors, I encourage whoever is capable or possible of reaching out to those community-based organizations who also provide support services and resources to the immigrant population, because they are those trusted messengers in the neighborhood and on the ground where they look to for support all the time. And so I encourage all of you to do that. And if I can be of assistance here in my office to help communicate, to help take messaging, to help be a bridge between the immigrant population and this committee or any of you, please feel free. We are here and at your service as well.
Thank you, council member. As always, you're on point, and we appreciate all you're doing. Hitting the ground running. Thank you, colleague. Are there any other questions or comments from members of this committee? Madam Clerk, this was our last panel. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How do you feel, Madam Clerk? You feel good about today's hearing?
I feel great about today's hearing. I think there are a lot of great discussions throughout all three panels, and it was great to listen in on what you guys had to say about the future of high school students in the Philadelphia School District and about them graduating. So it's great to hear all these discussions. Thank you.
There you go. Maybe we got something right today, ladies and gentlemen. Well, look, I want to say thank you to everybody for participating in today's conversation. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, we'll ask that if there is anyone else present in the hearing whose name we have filled the call that wishes to offer testimony on the resolution today. Hearing none, I would like to thank all the panels of witnesses for their participation today. This concludes the business before the Committee of Education today. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Have a great weekend. Have a safe weekend. Please mask up. This virus is still here. It's still back. This is the 6th season. And most importantly, have a very good holiday. Hug your family, love your family, and have a happy new year. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chair, great job. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Have a good one.